I was 45, and every line on my face had a story, most of them about staying up too late, working too long, and sacrificing too much. I wasn't some overnight success. I was the slow kind of triumph, the crawl-before-you-walk kind. A former mechanic who used to come home with oil on my hands and sore knees, who spent nights hunched over textbooks too heavy for their price tags. I made flashcards out of cereal boxes. I studied in my truck between shifts. And when my arms ached from lugging tires, I taught myself anatomy with YouTube videos and borrowed syllabi. I wasn't supposed to make it, but I did. After 10 long years of scraping by, I finally held it in my hands, a medical degree with my name on it. Not honorary, not online, not imaginary, real, paid for with sweat, silence, and the kind of lonely resilience no one claps for. So, yeah, I wanted to celebrate, not with a Facebook post or a pizza night, but with the kind of joy that made every sleepless night feel worth it. I booked everyone first class. Not economy, not business, first class. Renee, my wife. Her boys, my stepsons since they were 8 and 10. My mom, Gloria, who raised me on prayers and powdered milk. My sister Tessa and her fiancé, because love deserves to witness love. I printed the flight details on cream cardstock, sealed in gold envelopes like wedding invitations. I wanted them to feel honored, not just invited. Renee kissed my cheek when she opened hers. "You're incredible," she whispered. My mom got teary. "You're making us proud, baby." Tessa beamed and asked if her fiancé, Marco, could come too. "Of course," I said. "Of course. Why wouldn't I want my family there?" For a week, I imagined us all together, laughing in a hotel lounge, watching me walk that stage, snapping pictures that would live on mantles and in photo albums. I imagined hearing their cheers as my name echoed in the auditorium. Dr. Marcus Callan. I imagined Renee holding my hand, the boys nudging me proudly. I imagined my mother clapping so hard her ring slid sideways. Instead, what I got was silence. The morning of the flight, my suitcase was packed. I stood by the window of our apartment, coffee going cold in my hand, waiting for the usual chorus of movement, keys jingling, Renee telling the boys to hurry, Gloria fussing about something she forgot. But there was nothing. Just one buzz. A text. From Renee. "Hey, change of plans. We're all headed to Grant's housewarming instead. Love you. We'll celebrate soon, promise." Grant, my younger brother. The one who coasted through life like it owed him something. A realtor with perfect teeth, no college debt, and a pool that he didn't have to install himself. His latest accomplishment? A granite-countered, white-shuttered suburban palace complete with a fire pit and Instagrammable lighting. And apparently that deserved more attention than 10 years of my life. I reread the message. Twice. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, then curled back in. What could I say? Thanks for nothing? Tell Grant congrats on the kitchen island? I set the phone down, slowly. The ache started behind my ribs and rose into my throat. I swallowed it, because I always did. Because no one likes a man who gets emotional. Not at 45. Not when he's supposed to be strong. I still got on the plane. Alone. I sat in seat 2A, looking at the empty seats around me that were supposed to be filled with my family. I watched strangers sip champagne while I turned the envelope over in my lap. The one I'd made for Renee. Her name was still on it in gold script. I almost asked the flight attendant if I could mail it back to myself, proof that I had tried. I arrived, suited up, and walked that stage. I shook hands. I smiled for the photos. Alone. The crowd clapped for each graduate, but none of those claps belonged to me. The row I'd reserved was a mocking stretch of emptiness, every chair a reminder of someone who chose something else. Chose someone else. After the ceremony, I stood outside the venue while other families hugged and took pictures in the sun. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just walked 3 blocks to a cafe and sat with my diploma in a padded envelope and a cappuccino I didn't finish. The barista asked if I wanted it to go. I said no. I wanted to sit there until the ache stopped. It never did. I thought about the 14 grand I'd spent. Money I didn't really have but spent anyway because I believed people would show up for me the way I always showed up for them. Renee's car repair. Grant's loan. Gloria's furnace. Tessa's moving expenses. I'd never kept track. I just gave, because that's what family meant to me. Until that day. Until my triumph was replaced by someone else's marble countertops and poolside drinks. Until I realized that maybe they hadn't been celebrating me at all. They'd just been enjoying the benefits of my climb. And the second I wanted something in return, they vanished. That was the day I stopped making excuses for people who left me behind. And that was the beginning of everything else. The ceremony ended without cheers from my corner, just the whisper of my name across the stage and the sound of other families celebrating in full volume. I shook hands, accepted the diploma, and posed with the dean while trying not to think about the empty row that was supposed to be mine. Not just empty seats, empty presents. My mother's pride. Renee's applause. The boys' awkward but sweet thumbs up from their phones. It wasn't just a no-show. It was abandonment dressed up as inconvenience. Outside the auditorium, sunlight bounced off the glass walls and hit me square in the face. I blinked, dazed. A man in his 20s brushed past me with flowers and a hug waiting for someone else. I wondered, briefly, what it must feel like to be met with arms wide open. I'd been so sure this was going to be that moment for me. I earned it. I bled for it. I had no backup career. This was it. And they'd skipped it for patio, hors d'oeuvres, and a tour of Grant's walk-in pantry. I sat on the bench outside the venue and opened Facebook. I don't know why I did. Maybe I thought they'd posted something, a belated congratulations, a selfie with a caption that tried to make up for their absence. Anything. But there it was, plain as betrayal. A wide shot of Grant's backyard. My mother in her pearl earrings, holding a flute of champagne. Renee in her coral dress, one I bought for our anniversary. Tessa, laughing with Marco by the grill. The boys, shirtless and grinning in the pool. And the caption, shining like spit in the face. New beginnings, family always shows up where it counts. I read it 3 times, each one harder than the last. Family always shows up where it counts. And just like that, I wasn't sad anymore. I was hollow. Something cracked deep inside, but it wasn't anger, not yet. Just something brittle and final, like the snap of a dried branch. I could still hear my name being called on that stage, still remember the way I looked into the crowd out of instinct, still remember the sting of finding no one there. And now, this? Then I saw it. Buried in the comments, just a short reply from Grant, but it cut sharper than anything else. You're not even a real doctor. No, congratulations. No, proud of you. No, sorry we missed it. Just that. You're not even a real doctor. I stared at the screen, my hand going cold around my phone. I could feel the heat rising up my neck, not rage yet, but the warning pulse of something darker. I didn't scream. I didn't post some angry reply. I didn't call Renee or my mother or anyone. I just closed the app and opened my files. I still had the scans of the flight bookings. The invoice from the airline. First-class tickets, 7 of them, purchased with the kind of money I shouldn't have spent, but did because I wanted to honor them, to celebrate with them, to feel like they were part of this victory. Instead, they chose a barbecue. They chose Grant's housewarming over my life's work. So I sent them all a message. Not a rant. Not a desperate plea. Just 2 attachments. The first, a clean scan of my medical degree, embossed and signed, a decade's worth of resilience bound in gold trim. The second, a PDF of the flight invoice. Clear as sunlight. Labeled at the top in bold. Flight expenses, paid in full, $14,672.81. No note. No explanation. Just facts. And then I turned off my phone. That silence? It was the best sound I'd heard in weeks. I didn't want the excuses, the slippery apologies, the half-lies about how they meant to come, or how Grant's invite was last minute. I didn't want explanations that made me out to be the dramatic one. Not this time. Let them stew in the numbers. Let them see the truth in black and white. For the first time in a long while, I felt the heat of clarity rising in me like breath before a storm. I'd been the one who always fixed it. The one who apologized first. The one who swallowed it down and kept the peace. But sitting there on that bench, diploma in one hand, phone off in the other, I finally asked myself the question I'd never dared before. What if I stopped trying to earn their love? What if I stopped begging to matter? They made their choice. Now it was time for mine. I didn't turn my phone back on for 2 days. I needed time to let the numbness settle. To sit in the quiet and feel what it meant to finally stop hoping for the things I thought were owed to me. Love, loyalty, basic decency. I stared at my medical degree hanging in the hotel room I booked myself, simple frame, no gold trim. Just my name, the seal, and 10 years of sacrifice boiled down to 2 words. Dr. Callan. That should have been enough. It should have felt like a crown. Instead, it felt like armor. When I powered the phone back on, I braced myself. The notifications didn't disappoint. Not a single apology. Not one, we messed up. What I got instead was a chain of voicemails from Renee that sounded like a carousel of excuses and manipulation. The first one was light, laughing, even. Sweetheart, it was one party. You're being dramatic. The next had more edge to it. We thought it wasn't a big deal. You're a grown man. You don't need cheerleaders at everything. Then the last one. The one that nailed the lid shut. You didn't even go to a real med school. Wasn't it some online thing? I stared at the screen for a long time. That voice, hers, used to be my anchor. Now it just felt like a weight tied to my ankles. Doubt disguised as concern. Dismissal cloaked in affection. I didn't even reply. I didn't need to. I blocked her. Then I blocked my mother. Grant. Tessa. Every single one of them. But I wasn't done listening. Not yet. Something inside me turned cold, calculated. I dug out my old laptop from med school, dust still clinging to the corners. It booted up slower than I remembered, like it, too, needed a moment to adjust to what was coming. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe a way to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined the way they treated me, that I hadn't been paranoid, that the disrespect didn't just show up one morning, it had been there all along, creeping behind smiles and favors. What I found were audio files, recordings I made during my study sessions. Sometimes, I recorded myself reading chapters out loud. Other times, I'd hit record when the family was around, just so I could review discussions without taking notes. I never deleted them, just buried them under folders labeled neuro or pathophies. One file caught my eye, dated exactly 2 weeks before graduation. I remembered that day. It was when I had booked all the flights. My heart had been full then. I'd come into the living room, smiling like an idiot, telling Renee and Gloria I'd handled everything, that they wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I even remember saying, all you have to do is show up. I hit play. Gloria's voice came through first. He's spinning like a show-off. First-class tickets? Who does he think he is? Then Grant. He just wants applause. Like always. Then Renee, low and dismissive. He's not curing cancer. He's going to be broke in a year, and then we'll be stuck picking up the pieces. I sat there, shoulders frozen, the words sinking into me like shards of ice. That wasn't behind my back. That was in my living room. I paused the file, breathed in, exhaled like I was prepping for surgery. Then I opened a new folder on the desktop and named it what it deserved to be named, Family Receipts. Inside that folder, I began compiling everything, not out of spite, not for revenge, but because I needed to face it. All of it. The truth, laid out like a case study. Exhibit A, audio of my mother calling me a show-off. Exhibit B, Renee doubting the very degree she once toasted. Exhibit C, a PDF of the credit card I paid off for Grant last winter labeled Christmas Miracle. I became meticulous. Surgical. I added screenshots of the emergency transfers I'd made to help cover bills for Tessa. Text threads where Renee thanked me for paying the boys' tuition housing. Then 2 months later laughed about how I played sugar daddy and didn't even notice. I wasn't being bitter. I was finally being accurate. Because for years, I let love rewrite reality. I gave them grace they never earned. I told myself they were just joking, or that I was too sensitive, or that one day they'd understand everything I was doing for them. But now I had the receipts. And the receipts don't lie. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just clicked save. Then I stared at the screen and whispered, not anymore. The reservation was still active. I had called La Fiamma months ago, right after finalizing my exam schedule, right before booking the flights. Rooftop dining, sunset views over the city, candles flickering at every table. It wasn't just a dinner, it was meant to be a capstone. A final course after a decade-long meal of struggle. I wanted to toast with the people I loved most. Wanted to watch the city lights with Renee's hand in mine, hear my mom gush about the wine, listen to the boys joke about how they couldn't pronounce the Italian names on the menu. Instead, I arrived alone. The hostess recognized my name and smiled politely as she led me up the curved staircase to the rooftop. Your table's right over here, Dr. Callan, she said. It was the first time someone addressed me with that title in public, and it hurt more than it should have. Not because of what she said, but because the people who should have been the first to say it had never bothered. I sat down, the lone man at a table set for 8. Fresh linen, folded napkins, polished glassware. A silent setup for a party that had already died. I should have canceled. Should have eaten a sandwich alone at home. But I needed to be here. I needed to feel every empty chair, needed the reminder. For the first 20 minutes, I sipped sparkling water and listened to the low hum of conversation around me. Other families, other celebrations. Birthdays, anniversaries. People clinking glasses, leaning in close, telling stories with the kind of joy that comes from knowing you belong. And then I heard heels. Click, click, click. I looked up, and there she was. Renee, in heels and a form-fitting green dress, hair curled like she was ready for a magazine shoot. She smiled like this was just any other night, like nothing had happened. Hey, baby, she said softly, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I turned my head just enough to miss it. She blinked, confused. What? You came, I said, voice even. I thought you had plans at Grant's. Oh, that wrapped up hours ago. She sat beside me like nothing was broken. Thought I'd surprise you. I didn't reply, just took another sip of water and looked over the railing at the skyline. Then came the rest. Gloria, in a pearl necklace and matching earrings. Tessa and Marco, hand in hand. Grant, of course, wearing one of his tailored blazers and that permanent smirk. Each of them smiled, awkward but a tempting charm, as if this dinner was just a continuation of something beautiful, not the patchwork aftermath of a betrayal. Gloria patted my shoulder. We thought you'd appreciate some company. I stared at the table. Right? Because you've all been so supportive. There was a beat of silence. And then, from behind me, a voice that I didn't expect to hear. Marcus. I turned. Dr. Karen Holloway. My supervisor. Mentor. The woman who had written the letter that secured my residency. She stood in a navy blazer, face warm but eyes sharp. She looked around the table and then at me. I got your message, she said gently. Didn't know I'd be joining a family gathering. I stood to greet her, my chest tightening. You're right on time. She sat beside me, her presence like steel wrapped in silk. She didn't smile at the others, just waited. Then I pulled out my tablet, placed it on the table, and pressed play. Audio poured from the speaker. Familiar voices. Familiar insults. He's spending like a show-off. He just wants applause. He's not curing cancer. The air grew thick. Gloria shifted in her seat. Renee's mouth parted. Tessa's hand gripped Marco's. Grant went pale. I didn't stop there. I tapped the screen again. PDF files, each titled and labeled. $14,672.81. First-class tickets. $3,200. Last-minute tuition payment for Renee's son. $1,400. Tessa's engagement ring balance. $2,000. Grant's startup that folded in 6 months. Screenshot after screenshot. Transfer confirmations. Receipts. Conversations. You mock me while spending my money, I said calmly. You call me dramatic while draining my savings. You skipped my graduation but never missed an opportunity to ask for something. No one spoke. Then I turned to Grant. Still not a real doctor? His face was bloodless. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out a manila folder. Handed it to Renee. She opened it slowly. Inside, a list of credit cards and her name I'd canceled that morning. A lease termination notice for the apartment I'd paid for. And on top, a legal separation agreement, signed, notarized, dated. I hope Grant's pool has a guest room, I said. Because you'll need one by Monday. Renee's lips trembled. She looked at my mother, then at Dr. Holloway. No one came to her defense. Dr. Holloway placed her hand on mine. Let's get dessert, she said. You've earned something sweet. And just like that, I stood. I left the table. The skyline behind me. My old life crumbling on the rooftop. Dinner was served. And it was cold. It took less than 24 hours for the spin to begin. I had barely finished cleaning out the apartment, packing up the things I'd paid for, boxing up the clothes I no longer needed to share drawer space with, disconnecting the utilities I'd been the only one paying for, when I got a ping from a friend on Facebook. Hey man, you okay? That was the first clue. The warning shot. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't shared what happened at La Fiamma. I hadn't told anyone about the audio or the receipts or the separation documents. But someone had. And not the truth. I opened the app and saw the post from Gloria first. A full-length photo of me from 2 years ago, Thanksgiving, when I was still trying to keep the peace, standing behind a turkey I cooked with a smile I faked. The caption read, "We raised him with love. But success makes some people cold. All we ever did was support him. Sometimes, when people get what they want, they forget who was there when they were nothing." It was drenched in martyrdom, crafted to look like concern. I read it twice and still couldn't decide what infuriated me more, the passive aggressiveness or the fact that her friends were commenting things like, "Stay strong, Gloria." and he'll come around. I didn't comment. I didn't like or react. I just scrolled on. Next came Renee's post. A selfie of her in soft lighting, eyes misty and lips barely curved in sadness. The caption was worse than glorious. Divorce shouldn't be a punishment for missing a party. I wish people understood that love requires grace, not perfection. And the comments poured in. You deserve better, Renee. He always seemed distant. Can't believe he walked out on you like that. They were painting me as the villain. The cold, ungrateful success story who forgot the people who raised him. As if the nights I stayed up working and studying were group projects. As if the money I spent came from a joint effort. As if the support they gave was anything more than convenient applause when it didn't interfere with their plans. I could have replied. I could have posted screenshots right then and there. But I didn't. Not yet. Because the universe, in its poetic timing, had its own post to share. That evening, the hospital made the announcement. Welcome Dr. Marcus Callan to the emergency care team at Northside General. My name, my photo, my credentials, posted across LinkedIn, the hospital website, and their social platforms. Shared by doctors, residents, and local partners. It was real, public, undeniable. Not a dream. Not some online scam. Not something Grant could mock anymore or Renee could diminish. This was the fruit of 10 years of labor. A badge I bled for. Within an hour, the post had spread. Friends and classmates from med school began commenting. Former coworkers shared it with captions like, "Knew he'd make it," or "Proud of you, Marcus." The kind of recognition I'd never asked for, but had always hoped my family might someday give. And then, the inevitable happened. People started tagging them. My mother, my sister, Renee, even Grant. They were looped into the celebration they had never shown up for. Suddenly, their narrative began to fray. The cracks showed up in Renee's replies first. Of course we're proud of him. We just had a scheduling mix-up. Then Gloria chimed in beneath a comment thread. We supported Marcus for years. We love him deeply. It was the digital version of cleaning a crime scene after someone already live-streamed the evidence. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to defend myself. The truth was circulating faster than their version could hold. But what hit me most wasn't the posts or the praise. It was a message I received privately that night. A DM. From a man I barely remembered. We went to night classes together when I was still rotating tires during the day and studying pre-med at community college. You probably don't remember me. I just wanted to say, you inspired me to go back. I'm in my third year now. Saw your announcement and teared up. Thank you. That message? That was the moment I realized none of them could touch me anymore. Renee could post all the polished tears she wanted. Gloria could twist the truth in velvet-lined captions. Grant could sneer from his pool and joke about real doctors. But I was done living in the echo chamber of their approval. I had stepped out of it. I had built something they couldn't rewrite. I had survived them, and still become the man I said I would. The spin had begun, but it was already too late. The world had already seen the truth. And this time, it was on my terms. I didn't send them a bill out of spite. I sent it for the same reason a doctor takes an X-ray before surgery. To see clearly what's broken, to map the damage, to hold the undeniable truth up to the light. You can't treat what you refuse to diagnose. So I hired a lawyer. Not to sue them. Not to drag them through court, just to tally the cost of my silence. He was a sharp, unbothered man named Clive who didn't flinch when I told him what I wanted. You want a total of everything you've paid to support them, he confirmed, fingers poised above the keyboard. Yes, I said. Everything. Rent, tuition, loans, emergency favors, medical bills, flights, gifts, all of it. He nodded, calm and efficient. Receipts. I handed him a flash drive. Inside that drive lived a decade of me saying yes when they gave me reasons to say no. It held emails, Zelle transfers, Venmo notes disguised as jokes, happy grantpreneurship, and statements that started with $0 and ended in overdraft. That flash drive was a graveyard of my boundaries. Clive spent a week combing through it all. He organized the data like a surgeon maps veins. When he called me back to his office, he had a folder in his hand and an eyebrow slightly raised. Final tally, he said, sliding it across the desk. I opened it. $66,084.43. That number didn't scream. It didn't weep. It just sat there like a gravestone. Cold. Unapologetic. Real. Clive cleared his throat. That includes. I know what it includes, I said, eyes scanning the breakdown. $2,000 for Grant's business that went belly up in 6 months and somehow turned into him buying a new watch. $1,400 for Tessa's engagement ring upgrade after Marco lost his job and she couldn't wear something that looked like a mood ring. $12,000 in college housing for Renee's boys. Not my boys. Never adopted, but raised, fed, and covered like they were mine because love didn't use to ask for proof. There were groceries bought when Gloria forgot her card. Flights booked when Tessa was too stressed to plan her own trip. Loans extended with no paperwork, just guilt and good intentions. I had never once asked for it back. Until now. Clive looked at me. So what do you want to do with it? I smiled. I just want them to see it. He paused. You don't want reimbursement? No, I said. I want accountability. That evening, I drafted the email. No flourish. No emotion. No parting shot. Just the facts. Subject. This is what it costs to be your ATM. Body. Attached is a full breakdown of financial support rendered over the last 10 years. I'm not asking for repayment. I'm offering clarity. This isn't revenge. It's closure. Attachment. Callan_family support_summary.pdf. I hit send. And then I waited. It didn't take long. Renee was first. A text, because of course she wasn't blocked on my new number yet. Really? You're going to weaponize kindness now? Then she followed it up with a screenshot of her own post. A selfie. Tear-streaked. Captioned. Some people use generosity as a trap. I loved him. I supported him. And now he's turning our life into a receipt sheet. Hashtag mental health. Hashtag divorce hurts. Hashtag nothing. I closed the message and didn't reply. Because here's the thing. People like Renee want you quiet. They don't mind taking from you as long as you're smiling when you hand it over. The second you name the cost, suddenly you're the villain. Suddenly, you're bitter. Cold. Ungrateful. No, I wasn't bitter. I was done. For too long, I had confused silence with peace. I had let my love be alone with no terms, my support be in Ford drip they never unplugged from. Every time they rolled their eyes or made jokes at my expense, I told myself it was just how families are. Every time Renee said, "Don't make it a thing," I didn't. Well, this was me making it a thing. I wasn't the broken one. I wasn't the problem. I had earned everything I gave. And I finally realized, not everyone who receives your generosity deserves your grace. Some people mistake silence for consent. So I raised my voice, in spreadsheets, and statements, in clarity. And I made sure they heard it. I used to think silence was strength. That if I just kept my head down and worked harder, loved harder, gave more, eventually people would see me. That they'd come around. That they'd clap for me the way I always clapped for them. But silence didn't make me noble. It made me invisible. It gave them the space to rewrite me in their image, cold, arrogant, ungrateful. A walking wallet with a stethoscope. So I wrote a blog post. Not a rant. Not a hit piece. Just the truth, told in order, with the kind of precision I'd learned from years of stitching people up in Trio. No fancy graphics. No dramatic music. Just the raw data of my life, laid out like a medical history. Clear. Concise. Undeniable. Title. Not a real doctor. A diagnosis of family. I started from the beginning. I wrote about the nights I worked double shifts at the auto shop, grease still on my elbows while I pored over anatomy books during midnight lunch breaks. I wrote about the years I spent making $12 an hour while saving every penny for pre-med classes, sleeping in my car when I couldn't afford rent. I wrote about Renee's encouragement in the early days, how it eventually shifted into eye rolls and jokes about how long it was taking, how I still paid for her son's housing while rationing my own groceries. I wrote about the degree, the flights, the empty seats, the champagne toasts on Grant's patio, the "you're not even a real doctor" comment, the receipts, the recordings, the rooftop dinner, the silence afterward. And I ended with this. I didn't cut them off because I became someone new. I cut them off because they never saw me in the first place. This isn't revenge. It's recognition. Sometimes love doesn't break, it unravels. And when you finally see the thread, you stop tying it back together. I posted it to a private blog. No names. Just initials and roles. I didn't think anyone outside my circle would even read it. It wasn't for the world. It was for me. But someone shared it. And the world showed up. First, it was a few comments from strangers. Then hundreds. Then thousands. People sharing their own stories of silent betrayal, of being the giver until there was nothing left to give. People who had been mocked for dreaming too big, for working too hard, for finally drawing a line. Then came the podcasts. A wellness therapist with a mid-sized following quoted my closing paragraph in her episode about emotional freeloading. A financial boundaries coach read excerpts aloud, called it one of the most honest takes on family debt and dignity. Then came the articles. 45-year-old doctor rebuilds life after family betrayal. When housewarmings matter more than degrees. A story of boundaries and becoming. I opened my inbox one morning and found interview requests from blogs, YouTubers, even a small documentary team interested in a feature called The Price of Making It. And all the while, my family scrambled. Tessa emailed me first. Can you please take the blog down? It's affecting Marco's business. I didn't reply. Then Gloria sent a long, furious message that opened with, "How could you humiliate us like this?" and ended with, "We were just trying to keep things lighthearted." I didn't reply. Renee, of course, tried to be subtle. She sent a message that read, "People are asking questions. I'm getting DMs from strangers. You're better than this, Marcus." But I was finally learning that being better didn't mean being quiet. So I responded, for once. Just 3 words. Now they see. Because that's what this was about. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just exposure. The way a wound needs to be exposed to the air to start healing. I wasn't trying to make them look bad. I was just done making myself look smaller so they could feel big. I wasn't hiding anymore. And for the first time, the silence felt like mine. A silence I chose. Not the kind you're cornered into. A silence filled with freedom. There's a certain kind of audacity that doesn't come from desperation. It comes from entitlement. The kind that doesn't flinch at betrayal because it assumes the world owes it grace no matter the damage left behind. I thought I had seen the worst of that in Renee when she stood silent while Grant mocked me. When she dismissed my absence at the dinner table like it was a minor inconvenience. Not the collapse of 10 years of support. But then she started a GoFundMe. And that's when I realized I hadn't even scratched the surface. It was a Sunday morning, quiet, peaceful. I had brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the kind I could never enjoy back when every dollar was marked for someone else's crisis. I had just settled onto my couch with a medical journal when I got the ping, an email from a mutual acquaintance. Subject line, "You seeing this?" The link took me to the GoFundMe page. Title, "Help me rebuild after my husband's mental collapse." I stared at it for a long time, not even reading it first, just blinking, as if somehow the words would rearrange themselves into something rational, something human. The banner photo was from our wedding, me in my tailored navy suit, her in a dress I'd paid for in monthly installments. We were smiling, holding hands under a string of fairy lights. A snapshot from a day that now felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. Then I read the description. After years of standing beside my husband while he pursued his dream, he suddenly walked out on me and my boys. No warning, no discussion, just silence. His behavior changed after graduation. We believe stress and pressure got to him. Now I'm trying to rebuild our lives. Anything helps. $9,000 for $100. That's what it had raised already. From strangers. From people who had read that paragraph and thought she was the victim. That she had been blindsided by some tragic unraveling. That I had suffered a mental collapse. No mention of the skipped graduation. No mention of the flight tickets. No mention of the recordings or the rooftop dinner or the invoice marked ATM. Just pity, carefully curated and sold like soap. I felt the heat rise in my chest, not rage, but insult. The kind that burns with a different kind of flame. She wasn't just rewriting the narrative anymore. She was selling it, monetizing my silence. So I did something simple, something surgical. I donated $1. Just one. And in the comment section, I left this. "Here's the story you didn't tell." With receipts. Link to my blog. I clicked submit and walked away from the screen. Within the hour, her inbox started flooding. I know because people sent me screenshots. Some polite, some scathing. One simply said, "Is this what you call rebuilding?" By the 3rd hour, the GoFundMe was frozen. By the 4th, it was shut down. And just like that, the smoke from her latest illusion cleared, and behind it, the wreckage stood in plain view. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. I didn't even check the blog stats to see how much traffic the link had brought in. It wasn't about that. It was about balance. For every lie she tried to spin into cash, I gave the truth a spine and let it stand on its own. But part of me still sat with the image of our wedding photo. I thought about how long I believed in it, how hard I worked to preserve the version of us I thought was real. And now, it had become a prop, a pitch. There's something sacred about the stories we live, something unforgivable about someone turning those stories into bait. That night, I stood in my small backyard with a fire pit I'd never used until now. I printed out the screenshot of the GoFundMe, just the banner and the caption. I folded it once, then again, and dropped it into the flame. The paper curled in on itself, edges blackening, then glowing red before it vanished. Smoke rose, clean and final. There was no applause, no music, just the sound of truth reclaiming its space. I turned, walked back inside, and closed the door. Behind me, the past kept burning. There's a certain kind of audacity that doesn't come from desperation, it comes from entitlement. The kind that doesn't flinch at betrayal because it assumes the world owes it grace no matter the damage left behind. I thought I had seen the worst of that in Renee when she stood silent while Grant mocked me. When she dismissed my absence at the dinner table like it was a minor inconvenience, not the collapse of 10 years of support. But then she started a GoFundMe. And that's when I realized I hadn't even scratched the surface. It was a Sunday morning, quiet, peaceful. I had brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the kind I could never enjoy back when every dollar was marked for someone else's crisis. I had just settled onto my couch with a medical journal when I got the ping, an email from a mutual acquaintance. Subject line: "You seeing this?" The link took me to the GoFundMe page. Title: "Help me rebuild after my husband's mental collapse." I stared at it for a long time, not even reading at first. Just blinking, as if somehow the words would rearrange themselves into something rational. Something human. The banner photo was from our wedding, me in my tailored navy suit, her in a dress I'd paid for in monthly installments. We were smiling, holding hands under a string of fairy lights. A snapshot from a day that now felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. Then I read the description. After years of standing beside my husband while he pursued his dream, he suddenly walked out on me and my boys. No warning, no discussion, just silence. His behavior changed after graduation. We believe stress and pressure got to him. Now I'm trying to rebuild our lives. Anything helps. $9,400. That's what it had raised already. From strangers. From people who had read that paragraph and thought she was the victim. That she had been blindsided by some tragic unraveling. That I had suffered a mental collapse. No mention of the skipped graduation. No mention of the flight tickets. No mention of the recordings or the rooftop dinner or the invoice marked ATM. Just pity. Carefully curated and sold like soap. I felt the heat rise in my chest, not rage, but insult. The kind that burns with a different kind of flame. She wasn't just rewriting the narrative anymore, she was selling it. Monetizing my silence. So I did something simple. Something surgical. I donated $1. Just one. And in the comments section, I left this. "Here's the story you didn't tell." With receipts. Link to my blog. I clicked submit and walked away from the screen. Within the hour, her inbox started flooding. I know because people sent me screenshots. Some polite, some scathing. One simply said, "Is this what you call rebuilding?" By the third hour, the GoFundMe was frozen. By the fourth, it was shut down. And just like that, the smoke from her latest illusion cleared, and behind it, the wreckage stood in plain view. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. I didn't even check the blog stats to see how much traffic the link had brought in. It wasn't about that. It was about balance. For every lie she tried to spin into cash, I gave the truth a spine and let it stand on its own. But part of me still sat with the image of our wedding photo. I thought about how long I believed in it, how hard I worked to preserve the version of us I thought was real. And now, it had become a prop, a pitch. There's something sacred about the stories we live, something unforgivable about someone turning those stories into bait. That night, I stood in my small backyard with a fire pit I'd never used until now. I printed out the screenshot of the GoFundMe, just the banner and the caption. I folded it once, then again, and dropped it into the flame. The paper curled in on itself, edges blackening, then glowing red before it vanished. Smoke rose, clean and final. There was no applause, no music, just the sound of truth reclaiming its space. I turned, walked back inside, and closed the door. Behind me, the past kept burning. The last call came at night. I had just finished a long shift, one of those heavy ones where time collapses under the weight of human pain. A teenage girl had coded from an asthma attack. Her father, wild-eyed and helpless, stood behind the trauma curtain while we tried to bring her back. We did. Barely. I walked out of that ER with my scrub sticking to my back, the taste of adrenaline still in my mouth, and the sound of her father's sob of relief still echoing in my ears. I was exhausted. I wasn't thinking about Renee. I wasn't thinking about Grant or Gloria or the GoFundMe or the comments. I was thinking about breath. How fragile it was. How we all take it for granted until it's gone. Then my phone buzzed. Renee. The name lit up on the screen like a ghost trying to claw its way back into a life it had already vacated. I stared at it for a few seconds. Thought about ignoring it. Thought about blocking the number outright. But something told me this was the last one. The final performance. And some part of me needed to hear it, not for her, but for me. I answered. Her voice came through like wine through cracked glass. Weak. Shaky. Like she was trying to perform pain but didn't know where to begin. Why are you doing this to us? No hello. No, how are you? Just that. A question soaked in accusation, as if I had lit the match and not just stepped away from the fire they'd already built. I didn't answer. I wanted to see where she'd go if she had to navigate the silence. She sniffed. Sighed. Tried again. You left us. You didn't even try to talk things through. You just disappeared. I closed my eyes. Leaned against the counter. Let the weight of the day press into my bones. Then, finally, I spoke. I didn't disappear, Renee. I stopped performing. She was quiet. I continued. You all chose to skip my graduation. You all laughed behind my back. You all drank champagne in Grant's yard while I stood alone in a crowd meant to be family. I didn't walk out. I woke up. Another pause. Then came the pivot I knew was coming. But we were hurt too, Marcus. You humiliated us. Publicly. You posted our mistakes online. People think we're monsters. You did that, I said, calm and unshaken. I just provided the receipts. Her voice cracked next. Not from pain. No, I would have recognized that. From performance fatigue. From realizing the script wasn't landing. Grant says you've changed. That you're cold now. I almost laughed. No, Renee. I'm finally warm. I've spent the last 10 years freezing in your shadow, quietly funding lives that never once paused to ask how I was surviving. You all wanted me to rise, but never higher than you. I made it out, and that made me dangerous. There it was. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was honest. She took a shaky breath. So this is it. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Yes, this is it. And then I said the words I had carried with me for weeks. The ones that didn't sting, they clarified. Doctors perform amputations, Renee. Not because they want to. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to cut off what's infected. Her breath caught. I let the silence settle one last time. Then I ended the call. No dramatic hang-up. No final insult. Just a clean break. I stood there for a while afterward, my phone face down on the counter. The kitchen was quiet, dimly lit by the under-cabinet lights. Outside, the city hummed, tired and pulsing. I looked around my apartment. No wedding photos. No family portraits. Just my degrees on the wall. A cup of cold coffee. A stethoscope on the table. I felt lighter. Not euphoric. Not victorious. Just aligned. Like a bone finally set straight after years of limping through. Cutting people off sounds harsh until you realize the wound was never healing because you kept feeding it. Because you kept mistaking rot for roots. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No guilt. No what-ifs. Just breath. Steady. Strong. Mine. Moving wasn't just about a change of address. It was a declaration. I didn't forward the mail. I didn't text a new location. I didn't announce it on social media. I packed what mattered, my scrubs, my books, my coffee machine, my running shoes, and left everything else in the rearview. No boxes labeled memories. No nostalgia tucked between plates. I didn't want a single thing that had their fingerprints on it. Not because I hated them. Because I was finally done carrying weight that wasn't mine. The new place was smaller. Simpler. Quiet. A third-floor walk-up with a narrow hallway and creaky wood floors. The kitchen faced the east, so every morning started with soft light pouring in, touching the countertops like a gentle reminder that beginnings don't need banners, they just need space. No framed wedding photo on the mantel. No family portraits. Just my medical degree on the wall, centered perfectly above the desk where I now wrote my own future. I didn't expect the podcast to matter. It started as an idea scratched into a napkin on a lunch break, just something to fill the evenings. A voice memo here, a segment there. I called it Dr. Late, not lesser. The tagline? Some titles are earned, not inherited. Episode 1 was simple. Just me, sitting alone, mic clipped to my hoodie, talking into the silence I'd grown used to. I sent them the degree and the invoice. I began. I told the story. All of it. Not with venom, not with pity, just clarity. Like reading a patient's chart aloud. Family history. Diagnosis. Treatment plan. Prognosis. I didn't expect it to hit a nerve. But it did. In 4 days, it had over 1 million plays. Emails poured in. Some from med students who'd been told they weren't cut out for the profession. Some from people who'd walked away from toxic families and were still learning how to breathe. Others from quiet givers who never once asked for credit, just love that didn't come with strings or shame. People started calling me brave. But I wasn't brave. I was just done lying. Every cent of ad revenue from that first week, I didn't keep $1. I donated it in full to a scholarship fund I launched in the name of my late mentor, Dr. Karen Holloway. She passed just months after my graduation, quietly, unexpectedly. She never got to hear the podcast, never got to read the blog, never saw what I built. But she saw me when it mattered. She stood beside me on that rooftop when no one else did. She deserved a legacy louder than silence. So I gave it to her. The Dr. Karen Holloway Foundation for Late Bloomers. For students who started their dreams late, who had to work 3 jobs, who were told they were too old or not academic enough. I made sure they'd get what I never had, support with no strings, belief without conditions. It was one night, a few weeks after the podcast launch, that I found the letter. No return address. Just my name, scribbled in handwriting I knew too well. Inside, a folded family photo. The one we took at Grant's birthday, years ago. Everyone smiling. Renee holding my hand. My mom resting her arm on my shoulder. Grant, mid-laugh. The boys grinning in the front row. Tucked inside the photo was a card. For words, written in blue ink. We miss you. Gee. I stared at it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just absence disguised as sentiment. Like if they said, miss, it would erase the wound they carved. Like nostalgia could function as anesthesia. I walked out to the backyard. The fire pit waited, same one where I burned the GoFundMe printout. I knelt, lit the flame, and watched the photo curl into itself. The faces distorted. The smiles warped. The card blackened at the edges and disappeared into smoke. I didn't do it with anger. I didn't do it for theatrics. I did it for closure. Because I didn't miss who they were. I missed who I thought they were. I missed the version of them that lived only in my hope. That version never existed. And it was time to stop mourning fiction. As the flame died, I stood up, wiped my hands on my jeans, and walked back inside. The apartment was warm. The air was still. No voices waited for me. No accusations. Just silence. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was peace. I brewed a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and opened my laptop. Episode 4 was waiting to be edited. Title, You Don't Owe Them You're Becoming. Because I didn't. Because none of us do. Because some journeys don't need applause. They just need to be walked, head up, heart whole, truth intact. And I was finally walking mine.